Hey everyone, it's Billy Root for 58 Magazine, and thank you for watching The Art of Consciousness. Now let us consider the next of man's marvelous parts, namely the spinal column. Medical science now knows that the spinal cord is an elongation of the brain, and some authorities even claim it to be capable of intelligence throughout its entire length. The spinal cord is the flaming sword which is supposed to have stood at the gates of the Garden of Eden. The Garden of Eden is the skull. Within is a tree bearing 12 manner of fruit, the 12 cranial nerves. The disciples that Jesus met with are the 12 convolutions in the brain. These 12 convolutions gather around the central opening in the brain, the third ventricle, and these nerve centers in the brain send messages to the entire body to preach the good spell or the gospel. And you can learn more about these 12 disciples or these 12 disciplines of mind in my empowerment film, The Qualities of the Mind. The positive end of our body is our skull, the North Pole, and the bottom of our spinal cord is the South Pole, the negative end. The spinal column is Jacob's ladder that connects heaven and earth, and the 33 segments of the spine represent the years of Christ. The mountain that we have to climb in order to ascend is our spine, in order to reach the temple of initiation. That's why the Himalayan mountains rise above the earth, representing the shoulders and upper half of the body. They are the highest mountains of the world. The temple stands on the shoulders of Atlas, which is the upper vertebrae of the human spine. The energy centers vary in size and brightness in different people, and even in the same person, some of them may be much more developed than the rest. Each of the different petals of these 4 centers represent a moral quality, and that the development of that quality brings the center into activity. For example, the petals of the heart chakra are associated with devotion, laziness, anger, charity, and similar qualities. Some of these shades of color may indicate a form of the force which is helpful to the growth of some moral quality. And when that quality is strengthened, its corresponding vibration will be more pronounced. Hence the deepening or weakening of the tint to express the possession of more or less of that attribute. Each of these lotus blossoms has a different number of petals according to the number of nerves which branch out from it. There are some discrepancies to the number of petals in the heart chakra, as there are variants in the seals of different people and races. The petals of any one of these lotuses are made by the primary forces, which radiate out into the body along the spokes of the wheel. The number of spokes is determined by the number of powers belonging to the force, which comes through a particular chakra or seal. The first seal has 4 petals, and it receives energy from the earth. The second seal has 6 petals and receives vitality from the sun. The third seal has 10 petals and is associated to the lower astral. The fourth seal has 12 petals and is associated to the higher astral. The fifth seal has 16 petals and is associated with the lower mind. The third, fourth, and fifth seal feed certain nerve cells of the body. The sixth seal has 96 petals and is connected to the pineal gland. The seventh seal has roughly 1,000 petals, is connected to the pituitary gland. When you add the first 6 seals, these petals add to the number 144. When you multiply the petals of a 144 and the 7th seal, which is 1,000, it equals 144,000. The 6th and 7th seal are connected to the pineal and pituitary gland, and these are only activated when a certain amount of spiritual development has taken place. There is a sudden leap from 16 and 96 to 1,000 petals to show that those deal with a completely different order and the amount of nerves that accompany it. We do not know all the factors which determine the number of petals in a seal, but it is evident that they represent shades of variation in the primary force. And the one thing that is clear is that the need of the personality of the altered ego can be satisfied by a limited number of the types of force. But when we come to the higher and more honorable principles of man, we experience a complexity, a concentration, which demands for its expression a vastly greater selection of adjustment of this energy. In the root chakra, the first seal is at the base of the spine and has a primary force that radiates in 4 petals and is influenced by the moon. It is associated with the reproductive organs, sexuality, and survival. The sacral chakra. The second seal is at the spleen and is devoted to the specialization, subdivision, and dispersion of the vitality which comes to us from the sun. That vitality is poured out in the 6 petals and is influenced by Mercury. It is associated with pain and suffering and lives off of disease, guilt, and shame. As the brain is the center of the divine world, so the solar plexus is the center of the human world, representing semi-consciousness. It links the unconsciousness below with the consciousness above. Man is not only capable of thinking with the brain, but is capable of certain phases of thought through the nerve centers of the solar plexus. The solar plexus chakra, the third seal, is at the navel or solar plexus and receives the primary force with 10 petals. It is very closely associated with feelings and emotions of various kinds and is influenced by Venus and water. It is associated with power, control, tyranny, and victimization. The heart chakra. The fourth seal is at the heart and its primary force receives 12 petals and is influenced by the sun and fire. It is associated with felt love. The throat chakra. The fifth seal is at the throat and has 16 petals and is influenced by Mars. It is associated with expressed love. The third eye chakra. The sixth seal between the eyebrows has 96 petals and is influenced by Jupiter. It is associated with God seen in all life. The crown chakra. The seventh seal is at the top of the head and has roughly 1,000 petals and is influenced by Saturn. This seal is usually the last to be awakened. In the beginning, it is the same size as the others, but as the being progresses on the path of spiritual advancement, it increases steadily until it covers almost the whole top of the head. When the being realizes his or her position as a king and queen of the divine light, this seal reverses itself, turning inside out. It is no longer a channel of reception, but of radiation, a genuine crown of glory. And the organs by the seals are also influenced by the elements: the heart by fire, the liver by water, the lungs by earth, and the bladder by air. There are 3 principal forces flowing through the chakras, as they are representative of the 3 aspects of the Logos, which are the 3 spiritual stages of evolution, yet all 3 are one: the Father, the Mother, and the universe. Consciousness, energy, and matter. The Father, Virgin Mary, Christ, which is the Son of God. The serpent, fire. Connecting the 2 worlds, heaven above and the sphere of darkness below, is the spinal column, a chain of 33 segments protecting with them the spinal cord. Hindus teach that there are 3 distinct canals or tubes in the spinal system. They call them the Ida, Pingala, and Sushumna. These tubes connect the lower generative centers of the body with the brain. The Greeks symbolized them by the caduceus, or winged staff of Hermes. This consisted of a long rod, which is the central Sushumna, which ended in a knob or a ball, which are the pons of the medulla oblongata. On each side of this knob are wings arched over, used to represent the 2 lobes of the cerebrum. Up this staff and twisted around it wind 2 serpents, one black and the other white. These represent the Ida and the Pingala. The story of the goddess Kundalini is said that she descended by means of a ladder or cord from heaven to a little island floating in the Great Sea. The ladder or cord represents the umbilical cord, while the little island is the solar plexus. When the ladder is cut away from heaven, the goddess flees in terror to a cave, which is the solar plexus, where she hides far from the sight of men. This force, as the Eastern sages claim, can be drawn up through the central spinal canal, the Sushumna, Of these three currents which flow in and around the spiral cord of every human being are called nadis. The nadis, or channels, are said to connect at special points of intensity, the seals that carry life force energy, which is prana. The three principal nadis are Ida, Pingala, and the Sushumna. The subtle body consists of focal points, often called chakras, seals, connected by channels often called nadis that convey subtle breath, or prana. Sushumna, the chief seat of these three nadis, is the central tube of the spinal cord. Ida and Pingala are simply the yin and yang and the positive-negative energies. Ida is associated with lunar energy. Ida has a moon-like nature and feminine introverted energy with a cooling effect and corresponds to the right hemisphere of the brain. It courses from the left base to the left nostril. The right half of the brain is under the control of Mercury, the planet of intelligence, and as a result of the crossing of the brain nerves at the base of the skull, it rules the left side of the body. Pingala is associated with solar energy. Pingala has a sun-like nature and masculine extroverted energy and corresponds to the left hemisphere of the brain. Its temperature is heating and courses from the right base to the right nostril. The left half of the brain, under the control of Mars, the spirit of anger and impulse, rules the right side of the body. Among most cultures, the demon is symbolized as part animal, part human. He dwells in the animal nature of man, and those who are controlled by their appetites, their likes and dislikes, their hates and fears, need no further damnation. They have built their own hell and are experiencing its torments. And the two lobes of the cerebrum were called by the ancients Cain and Abel, and have to do with the legend of the curse of Cain, which is literally the curse of imbalance. Imbalance always distorts the viewpoint, and distorted viewpoints are evidently productive of misery. If you are balanced, these planetary influences will not affect you. If you are unbalanced, then that is why Mercury retrograde is such a trend. Ida and Pingala play along the curved wall of the cord in which is the Sushumna. They are semi-material, positive and negative, sun and moon, and start into action the free and spiritual current of Sushumna. They have distinct paths of their own, otherwise they would radiate all over the body. From these three a circulation is set up, and from the central canal passes into the whole body. The marriage of the forces. Through the mouth of the flower-like bell of the seal is on the surface of the etheric body. The stem of the trumpet-like blossom always springs from a center in the spinal cord. As the stems of all these seals start from the spinal cord, this force naturally flows down these stems into flower bells, where it meets the incoming stream of the divine life, and the pressure set up by the encounter causes the radiation of the combined forces horizontally along the spokes of the chakra, or the seal. When the two forces combine, there is a certain interlocking of some of the respective molecules. The Kundalini usually clothes itself in a flat ring of 7 atoms. Man is an inverted plant, gaining his nourishment from the sun as a plant does from the earth. As the life of the plant ascends its stem to nourish its leaves and branches, so the life of man, rooted in the brain, descends to produce the same result. This life descending is symbolized as the world saviors who came down into the world to die for men. Later, these lives are returned again to the brain, where they glorify man before all the worlds of creation. So much for the story of the brain.